So, good evening and welcome to Talking V8. Tonight, I'm joined by Marc Radforth. So, welcome, Marc, and thank you for talking with me this evening.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So, growing up around stock cars, how did you become involved?
Yeah, the family were big into speedway when we were growing up and used to travel around quite a bit. And obviously, with Coventry being our local track and big bees fans, I think it came from there. Obviously, going to the Saturday meetings and watching stock cars. And then in 2000, my cousin Carl bought a car, and from there it kind of progressed. And in 2001, I joined the team and helped him in the pits, and then in 2002 decided to have a go.
So, you became involved in racing the V8s. How did that come about? Was that through Carl?
Yeah, through Carl. So in the back end of 2002, Carl had ordered a new car off Neil Stutchbury for the 2003 season, and said, I'd been mechanicking for him for that season, and said, "Do you want to have a go?" So at the end of 2002, the last meeting of the season, I decided to go to the other side of the fence and and have a go.
So, how many years then have you been racing V8s for?
So I started in 2002 was my first meeting, but that was the last meeting of the season. So officially my first season was 2003. So sorry, 2001 was my first meeting. So 2002 was my first full season. So on and off 19 years. I'm not did every season in 19 years, but on and off 19 years I've been involved in some shape or form.
So, you race as a three-car team, yourself, Carl, and Richard. How do the logistics of that work?
Yeah, we're a close family, being cousins, and we all get on well most of the time. We have our moments, but we're mates on and off the track, and yeah, we've got our own workshop where we go, and we can either be there on our own or a couple of us or all three of us working together, and yeah, it's just a tight family knit team, and yeah, really good.
So, who would you say then is the better driver of the three of you, and why?
Good question. Then both of them have won major championships, and both are good drivers in their own right. Carl is such a clinical driver, clever on how he goes around the track, and me as well. Richard has just got good talent and raw talent. Probably doesn't race enough to hone that talent. So both on their day can mix it with the best. So I'm going to sit on the fence on this one and say they're both just as good as each other, with me slightly behind.
So, what is your earliest racing memory from your time in the V8s?
Probably that first meeting. To be fair, it was yeah. We'd gone to the practice on Northampton on the Wednesday. So Northampton was the meeting on the Sunday. There was Coventry on the Saturday, and then Northampton on the Sunday. And I remember going Wednesday, and I was flying around, or I felt that I was flying around. And then I went out in practice on the Sunday, and all these cars just flew by me, and I was panicking like mad, and I had a cross on my back, and I went out and I just hit everything. I got a little bit told me I wasn't allowed to do that. So for the second meeting, second race, they told me to take my cross off, and I was straight in with everybody else. And I didn't finish the first heat. I didn't finish the second heat. I rolled the car in the final. Um, so yeah, so it was a bit of an eye opening. And I managed to finish the Grand National. I think I finished 12th,
So, a
and
bit of a
over the moon.
steep learning curve then.
Very steep, but I was buzzing after that, and I certainly got the bug for the stock car racing, and never looked back from there.
Can you talk us through your first win?
Yeah, it was at Barford, so a bit of a trek up north, and Cyril was the promoter there. And I remember racing, and we'd been there the night before, stopped over, and we had a look at the track, and there was sheep on the track the night before, and we remember walking around, and then Cyril, the promoter, was brilliant. He walked me around the track, told me where to put the car, and I was starting off white. And I remember every race, the two heats and the final, I was leading it with about five to go, and then I think it was um, two or three drivers would come by me, and I'd finish fourth, and I finished fourth in the second heat and fourth in the final. I was getting a bit despondent because I was thinking I'm leading every race, but I couldn't just get it over the line. And then that Grand National, I was like, right, this is mine. I'm just gonna just go hell for leather, and I did, and I managed to win the Grand National. So it was my third ever meeting in a V8. So yeah, that was my first ever win.
So how about your first final championship?
Yeah, my first final was at Bellevue, and yeah, uh, I was the yellow tire. It was when Bellevue was really bumpy, and for people that know Bellevue, it used to be a really bumpy track, and I could never get it round, and it was, I used to push on a lot, and I remember racing this one time, and the car was going well, and I felt comfortable, and I got into the lead, and then all of a sudden I can see Carl in the mirror, and he's coming and he's coming, and literally I managed just to hold him off. Probably another lap. People say that he might have got me, but managed to hold him off. So I actually came first, and Carl came second in my first ever final win.
So good team day then.
It was a good team day. Yeah, he always says another lap, but that lap never came. So yeah, we'll take that one.
So you used to run a successful hire car business with the V8s. Do you see a place for that in the current climate? And how do you think that it helped with the formula?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is certainly in the current climate. We need to encourage new drivers and get people in. And it's a good way of people coming into the sport. We did it for a number of years, and there's still drivers in the formula now that started in our hire car. Guy Jolly, Nick Black, etc. So, and a few others that come and go now and again. So we've certainly, yeah, give people an opportunity. I think certainly in the current climate, as we start to get back to some level of normality, people might not have the funds to completely fund a race car and the setup, but may just want to have a go every now and again. So I certainly see that there's a place, and it is that trying to get people to encourage to go. Obviously you've got your F1s and F2s and various other formulas, and it's trying to attract them to see how much fun it is, and how much fun on and off the track the formula is. So certainly, definitely, I think there's a place for a hire car in the V8s, and we enjoyed our time, showing people, even if they only came for one time, showing them how to race, and it just give spectators and fans the opportunity to see the other side of the fence, which they might not never ever do. So yeah, so I really enjoyed the time hiring the cars.
So around 2008, you had a brief break from the V8s and ventured into the F1s for a handful of seasons. What was the reasoning behind this? And did you enjoy that time?
Yeah, it was a funny time for the V8s. I think the championship seemed to have good meeting, good turnouts, but the rest of the meetings we were struggling for car numbers, and I was wondering what to do, and I was doing every meeting, and I just was getting a bit bored, to be fair, if I was being
Yeah,
honest, and I even looked at venturing over to Speedworth. So I'd actually contacted Speedworth to see what I could do to convert my car, which not many people know, to be fair. So
right,
um, and we got in touch with some of the Speedworth drivers, how they were doing and what they were doing. And at the time, Speedworth were actually doing okay. And I'd been to a couple of meetings, and we decided that that wasn't for us. But by getting in touch with a couple of the Speedworth drivers, one of them actually bought Danny Clark's tarmac car, and
right,
the rules changed on the lorries emission zones. He was in the London emission zone, and couldn't afford to change his truck, and wasn't going to be able to transport the F1. So
right.
gave his first refusal on buying it. So we as a family bought it, and I ended up racing it for the first season. It was again starting at. I think I started at Blue. I was at Red Off Superstar and V8s at the time, and um, came down into Blue, and it was a soaking wet meeting at Northampton again. My first meeting in an F1, and you've got world champions Murray Harrison and Frankie Wayman and everybody behind me, and it was brilliant. Don't get me wrong, to be able to race with people that you've watched for years and admired, and but it was certainly nerve wracking, and we did that season, and I wrote the car off actually
Right.
again back at Northampton, um, and it was just unrepairable. So we managed to get a chassis which we bought off the Clares. It was an X-ray Witz chassis, and we stripped it and started brand new, and put all the Danny Clark running car gear in, and came out in 2010. First meeting was the Buxton Whites and Yellows Championship, and we ended up taking it the first day,
Well done.
which was great. Came second in the final. So first meeting out in the new car, hadn't even tested it. First wheel that we did was in practice on the meeting. We worked all day the day before to get the car ready, and even trying to get the truck ready so that you could take the car. And stopped over at my house, had some dinner, and went Buxton the following morning. So yeah, then we raced the British, qualified outside Road 2 that year. The year that Paul Hines won it, and yeah, really enjoyed my time in F1s. You know, I don't think there's anybody that will say that they don't enjoy F1s. The power, the crowds, everything about it was great. But I think most people will also say that it does cost a lot. And you know, and that year my wife was pregnant with twins, or announced she was pregnant with twins. So unfortunately, I had to make a decision, and you know, the right decision was to sell the car, and I sold. We went on holiday on the Sunday, put it up for sale the Sunday evening, and it sold on the Monday morning.
Crikey, went quite quick then.
That quick, yeah. So, but I really enjoyed it. But and then I made the decision with the money, I would come back into V8s.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, why did you decide to come back to racing in the V8s?
Yeah, well, obviously the family was still doing it. Carl and Dick was still racing V8s, and my uncle Bob, and you know, it just made sense to come back in and carry on. And you know, I love the V8s, and you know, the V8s are a great formula, and I think yeah, it was never a question that I wasn't going to come back in at some point. I knew F1s wasn't going to be forever, so it made sense to do it before I spent too much time out of racing.
Yeah, is that, you know, you say that you knew the F1s wasn't going to be forever. Is that purely because of the finance behind it?
I think it's a little bit of everything. Finance is one. Obviously, at the time, I got a young son, and obviously with twins coming on, young family, it just wasn't going to be. My career was probably taking off my work career as well, so
Yeah,
I was going to have a lot more off-track distractions. And I think with F1s as well, it's one of them ones that you've got to make sure the car is on point every meeting. You know, you take some big hits, every nut and bolt's got to be checked after them hits, and if you're not, then you know you can cause a lot of damage to yourself as well as the car, and again that costs. So and I just knew I wouldn't be able to dedicate the time to the car that I needed to, and also I won't be able to race as much as I wanted to, and that's an expensive hobby to have, just sitting there when you've now got 3 mouths to feed.
definitely. Your time in V8s, do you think that that prepared you well for going into the F1s then?
Oh, without a shadow of doubt. If anything, I think an F1's a lot easier to drive than a V8.
Right.
V8, obviously, with leaf springs and the way that the cars are set up, and you know, with standard parts and standard running gears, it's they are a lot harder to drive, and you've got to have the car set up if you want to get it around. An F1 with all that power, you know, yes, you still need to have it set up, you know, to race with the big boys in there. But if the car's not quite right, you can use the power to get you out of trouble. And you know, so that's for me. Without doing the V8 grounding, certainly I think it would have been a lot different story of how well I did in my short time in V8 in F1s.
So you've always been known for building and putting together nice and, in some respect, innovative cars with your team. They're always well presented. Does this give you as much satisfaction as the racing?
Yes, definitely, and I think you know we've tried over the years to bring in some new innovations. Probably not as extreme as some drivers, some builders out there, but certainly we've tried to be innovative and bring in things that we, you know, it's still in the formula now that people are doing as a standard. So that kind of makes us proud. As you know, we've certainly always made sure that the cars are well presented. You know, that's probably our calling card is well presented cars that, you know, go well. And there's a lot of our cars out there, along with people like Kev Stutchbury, etc. You know, there's probably just as, you know, a lot of our cars out there that people don't realise that we've built over the years. You know, we've never confessed to be, out and out car builders. We build for ourselves. We've never really built for anybody else, but certainly, the cars that we've built and sold on, there's a lot out there.
Do you think you would go into doing that, maybe building cars specifically for other people?
Um, I think not so much now. There was a time when we seriously considered it. There was a time when we were hiring cars, we were looking after cars. I think we had 13 cars in the workshop at one time. I think that's what we took to one of the world finals, 13 cars. So I think at one time it was something that we seriously considered maybe taking on, but we all had day jobs, and I think it's a big risk as well. And then the recession hit in 2008, and we decided to just concentrate on ourselves and downsize, and just concentrate on the three of us, and I think it's worked well since. But we do enjoy building cars and doing things differently, and I don't think we've ever built two cars that are the same. We've always tried to look at something different and something new, and certainly my new car has got a few new touches.
Which would you say is the most favourite car that you've had the chance to race to date?
It's a difficult one because I've raced lots of different cars, and not just stock cars, but certainly in stock cars, I've even raced a lot of people's other cars. So I've just jumped in cars and had a go. And but I'd probably say the most favourite V8 that I've raced would actually be Richard's tarmac car,
Right.
which was John Brown's shell car last year.
Okay.
So the Dutch driver raced it at the Skegness World Final and come second in. So when we got it set up for tarmac, the year that Dick won the Europeans, that car was on rails, and it was just a joy to race, and could easily get round. Probably second to that was my first ever car that I built for myself. I suppose I was proud of building it, and I managed to get it going well. So certainly on shell, it was up there with the best.
Okay. During your time racing, which has been your most memorable moment?
Um, I'm not. I've raced for a number of years, and unfortunately, I've never been lucky enough to win a major championship. One of the top four. But I think obviously your first win is always memorable, and one of your favourite things. I won 3 finals in a row. I don't think anything specifically sticks out for me. I think just enjoy racing now, and having some fun. The banter off the track as well. So I probably haven't got a most memorable. I suppose, like I say, that first win for me was probably still sticks in my mind, and just the feeling of winning that first race and getting it was probably my most memorable moment.
So out of all of the tracks that you've raced at, which would you say is your favourite and why?
Obviously, Coventry being our home track would obviously be my favourite shell track if it was still going. My out and out favourite track is Skegness. It's just the one track I seem to be able to get the car around, and no matter whose car I'm in, I seem to be able to do all right in it. It's a quick track. It's a tricky track if you're not on it, and it can be unforgiving. But I'd probably say Skegness is my favourite track.
And least favourite?
It was probably no. My least favourite was definitely the old Stoke.
Yeah.
I just could not get around Stoke, and I enjoyed the old bumpy shell tracks, but it was just one of my bogey tracks. I just couldn't get around.
You've spent time on the border control. What made you decide to get involved with that?
Yeah, I had 2 stints on the border control, and I just felt that as I was getting more and more experience in the sport, I felt like I needed to get involved. And again, my cousin Carl, he got involved, so he had 2 stints on the board. And I suppose me and him did a lot of things together as well. So that's probably the reason why. And again, trying to give something back to the sport. I think people underestimate what goes into being on the board, and it's certainly an unforgiving job, thankless task, and you can never please everybody, and I think that's why I wanted to go on there and make sure I understood it as well, and try and make sure that we were guiding the sport in the right direction, because sometimes people have opinions which whilst their own personal opinions doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for the sport. And I think we've got a good board at the moment, and certainly taking us in the right direction to get the car numbers back up.
So away from racing, then, what's your day job at the moment?
I'm a director of a shop solutions company, so we supply shop fittings to all your major retailers and shopping trolleys and roll cages and various bits of shop equipment. So that's what I do for a day job.
Oh, and what do you like doing when you're not racing?
I suppose friends and family, meeting up with them. Certainly in the current climate, I think we've all missed that.
Yeah.
So watching my kids play football, and obviously I used to play football quite a lot, and not so much now, but I still get involved with my local club, and so I suppose just friends and family and having a good time and a bit of a drink.
So you've mentioned the football. You're known to be handy with the football. If you could pick football or stock cars, which would you prefer?
Uh, a difficult question to answer, I suppose. I love the camaraderie of football, the banter, and football's. I've been playing football since I was a kid, and I've always enjoyed it. And yeah. But obviously the other side of stock car, both on and off the track, the people that you meet, the places that you go. It's more of an individual sport as well once you're on the track. So I think I prefer them both in their own different ways. I probably prefer to go and watch a stock car race than I would do a football match. But I prefer to be involved in a football match than stock cars. So bit of both really. But I enjoy both, and my kids enjoy both as well, which is great for me.
So what would be your ideal weekend or holiday?
I suppose ideal weekend is again with friends and family.
Yeah.
Having a drink and just having a good time. Like I say, I've got some good friends and obviously close family nearby, and it's just having. Life's too short, and I think that's certainly again with the pandemic and everything that everybody's been through in the last 12 months. They're the things that you kind of take for granted. So yeah, just being with friends and family for me.
So moving back to the stock cars then, who would you say have been your biggest rivals over the years?
Bit controversial, this one, I suppose, because I'm going to say I've got no rivals, but then I'm sure there's a lot of drivers that are going to be shouting out now saying, you didn't say that when we're having a bit of fun on track. I certainly think in my first year, and I always go back to my first year, I came into the sport and I was young, a little bit cocky, and some people might say I'm still a little bit cocky, but I certainly was putting the bumper around. And that first season, me and Chris BriSCA, he was obviously, I think it was his second season. There was a few others in that year, but certainly the big driver that I seemed to have a big rivalry that year was Ed Nischel. Every race we were going hammer and tong, and then it all came to blows at the world final. And he put me in, and then next race I put him over the top of the fence at Northampton.
Right.
Then next meeting we had the British, and unfortunately he qualified behind me. And I remember going into the first bend at Buxton, and then I got knocked out, and I remember finishing at the other bend at Buxton, and that's a big track. So woke up, and it was, we were like that every week until the board had to intervene. I think after the first year, I've had a few on track moments with a few drivers, Neil Stutchbury,
Mhm.
a few others. In more recent years, there was a little spat with me and Brian Andrews, who I've got a lot of respect for. He's been around the sport for a long time. I'm not sure what it was over, but I wouldn't say I've got rivals. I think I've had moments, I think is probably the way I would put it. Like
Do you
say,
think
maybe,
that's all part and parcel of the sport, or
I
like
think
you
it is,
said,
and
individuals?
I think hopefully people don't take it personally if things happen on track. And I've always tried to be that person that, rightly or wrongly, deals with it on track.
Yeah.
If you're big enough to give it out on track, you've got to be big enough to take it. And certainly, I've been big enough to take it. I've been big enough to give it out. And for me, as long as we can have a beer in the bar afterwards, then it
Yeah.
should be all good. So some people not so much, some people do take it personally, but yeah, it's never supposed to be personal. As long as we can all shake hands and have a beer afterwards, then it should be all
Yeah.
good.
So are there any drivers in V8s that you like to keep an eye on with their progress?
Yeah, I think certainly in more recent times, you look at the mini stock drivers that are coming through. There's a lot of talent in minis. It's a good grounding for people, and the cars are quick now in minis. There is quick cars out there, and so you're always going to want to see who's coming in, the new young blood. I think I always watched the Spencer brothers when they first came in because, again, good equipment
Yeah.
and talented drivers as well. So I think you always look at who's buying what equipment, but also the younger ones. So certainly that's probably where I'd be looking at, and also the ladies of the sport. I think it's tremendous that we've got so many ladies in what is a male dominated sport, which
Yeah.
is a shame to see that it is a male dominated sport, because they can mix it with us. So I think yeah, that's great to see, and you always keep an eye on how they've performed. So yeah, I think that's who I'd keep an eye on.
So who would you say are your top 3 V8 drivers currently?
Currently,
Mm.
oh, I think obviously, again, as I've mentioned, the Spencer brothers. I don't think you can not count them in there. John Brown, certainly Kev Stutchbury. Obviously I've been racing with him, like say, 19 years now. So for me, he's one of the all-time, top V8 drivers. So I would say, you look at them 3 or 4 drivers would be for me the top at the moment.
What are your plans for the current 2021 season?
Well, it's the first year ever that I'll have 2 cars. So which I'm pleased to have, and Matt Smith has kindly lent me a shell car, and I've built a new tarmac car for this season. So the plan is to try and do as many meetings as I can, and get ready for next season. So this is more of a testing season for me. I have had a few years out, so I'm a little bit rusty, I suppose, and need to get these cars right, and then get ready for 2022. So bit of fun this year. Go out
Yeah.
and like I say, get back in the swing of things, and see what 2022 brings.
So I believe you have a new car which you're about to reveal. Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah, it's been a long-term project, to be fair, because I actually bought the ladder chassis during my last season, which was the year that Phoebe won the British. So me and her qualified pole, and I just had such a heavy car, and I always said I'd never build another one after that for myself. And then I sold the car and decided to build one. And James Cobley and his father were building a ladder chassis, but decided that they'd got some off track business stuff that they were going to do, and didn't want to just leave the ladder there. And they were building it with Chris BriSCA. So Dougie actually contacted me and said, "Look, they've got a chassis. Why don't you buy it?" So I said, "Yeah, no problems." And I went straight away. That within half an hour of Dougie ringing me, I bought it and went over and picked it up. And like I say, it was just a bare ladder. And so it's took me 2 or 3 years to build, really, because my lad went into micro F2s as well for a season. So took a year out for that, and then obviously with the pandemic, etc. So we've taken our time on it, but I also wanted to do something a little bit different, and there's a few little tweaks on this car that people will see. So we spent a lot of time on how it's set up and how it's been put together, and just spend a lot of time on it, and yeah, so looking forward to bringing that out at some point this year.
So the car's looking good. What are your thoughts on Bradford for World Final and the sport returning there after so many years?
I think it's fantastic, and the fact that we've managed to agree, the board has managed to agree with Steve to get us on there in the first year of Bradford being back is brilliant. I know Steve Reese is got a he's a bit of a Marmite character. You either love him or hate him, and I've always gone on well with Steve, but he has a way of doing things, and credit to Steve and the team up there. They to bring that back, and for V8s to be a part of it is going to be something special. We are missing that track like a Coventry. I know we've got Kings Lynn, which for me is and Skegness, and the work that Rob's doing at Skegness is brilliant as well. To have another icon track, I think is what the sport needs. So yeah, I think it's great.
So, which type of track, if you had to choose, would you prefer to race on, shale or tarmac?
I think in my early years, I think it was always shale. I love shale, and I felt that I was really quick on and one of the top drivers in shale. But I love the speed of tarmac, and and you've got to be on it on tarmac, and the car's got to be right. So in the latter years, I've certainly concentrated more on tarmac and had more tarmac car rather than shale. But I think everybody enjoys shale, So I'd have to say I enjoy shale more, but I do love tarmac.
Have there been any funny moments in V8s?
Um, yeah, over the years, there's been loads, and I was fortunate to race in New Zealand as well. So going over there with Darren Cottrell and Matt Smith and Carl and Dick, and just having a laugh on the way. You know, people. Yeah, there's probably some stories that I can't say that are probably a little bit censored. People ended up naked under their transporters after a heavy night, and some of the stock car dudes at the yeah yeah, some of them as well, swapping clothes and all sorts. Yeah, I didn't look very good in them high heels, that's for sure.
Bet the wife had something to say about it.
So I think she'd gone to bed at that point. I think she realised I'd had enough, and yeah, she'd had enough as well. So that was certainly one of the funny moments. Yeah, but there's been loads, and like I say, I think the formula just creates good people and good banter, and obviously I've been fortunate to see lots of people come and go,
Yeah.
but the people seem to be the same that comes in. Always want to have a laugh and a good time on and off the track.
So, if you could change the sport as a whole, what would you do?
I think the first thing that everybody always says is cost, and that's probably not where I'm going to go first. To be fair, I think it's how we come together and move the sport forward. I think is probably the thing for me. I think drivers need to think about not them just themselves, is the sport and how we move the sport forward as a collective. I think sometimes it gets a little bit um, too personal, and it shouldn't do. We are
Mhm.
a good formula. We've got good people. When we get to the meetings, it's great, but we get too bogged down in some of the technical side of things. I think the communication, the things like this, has been brilliant. It's really given good airspace and getting reaching
Yeah.
to people that just wouldn't necessarily have normally seen it. And the more that we can do on that, and the more that drivers can support on that, and I think that's the other key is it's not going to be the same 4 or 5 drivers or people doing this. It needs more of the sport, more of the people to get involved and not be scared. Yes, okay, there's some big characters and some long-standing people in there, but we want more and more people to be involved. So I think for me, I think how do we bring people together to move the sport forward would be the one thing I'd like to see more change in that
Yeah.
direction.
Are there any things in V8s you'd potentially change?
Yeah, I think obviously, like I say, the cost is always the key. We've had to change some of the things in the V8s to keep the formula going, and that's obviously come at a cost. If we could look at trying to make it a little bit more cost sensitive, or even bring in certain changes that actually negate the need to spend money. And if you do spend the money, it's not going to be a competitive advantage. I think trying to manage that budget is always going to be difficult. Now that the formula's been going for so long, and maybe some of the gates are open, but yeah, trying to reduce costs. But if we can get more cars, I think that's the key. Got to get more cars out there. Probably not so many meetings as we've had in recent seasons. I think the fixture list for this year is looking fantastic. 17
Yeah.
meetings, good split of tarmac and shale. For me, I think you'll see a lot of good cars out on track, and that will just encourage more people because it's good racing. And the
Yeah.
more good racing, the better for the fans, the better for the promoters, and for better racing for the drivers. And we want to race with full grids. We don't want to have 10 cars out there.
Yeah. It always makes for a better race when you've got a full grid, doesn't it?
Definitely, and it makes it so that it's not just the top drivers that win.
Yeah.
And then we've got to think about the lower graders, because without them, there isn't a race. And it's great when you've got a full grid, and some of them lower graders win when they've got that full grid. I think that for me is where we've got to get the formula back to.
Yeah. So where do you see the V8s in the next 10 years?
I think if the V8s are sensible, it's certainly got a place. There is some work still to do behind the scenes, but the board are doing a great job on that for me. I think if we continue to work hard with the BSCDA and the F1s and the minis, I think it's got a good future. It's certainly that formula that fills a gap, and whilst we've always been known as that economy budget formula, I think we're that second formula behind F1s and F2s on cost. And I think that's the key to it. We are where we are, and it's a good stepping stone. Certainly from a mini straight into an F1 now, I think is probably a big jump, and there's not many that do that jump now.
Yeah.
So it's it's always going to be a starter formula, a feeder formula for others. And but I think the future's bright if we manage it in the right way, and that's why I said we've all got to come together to support that. It's not just about the board; it's about the drivers coming together and helping that. But yeah, if the tracks continue, and the good racing continues, I don't see any issues in the next 10 years.
So on a lighter note, if I told you that you could pick 5 drivers from V8s to share a taxi to go out on the town with you, who would you pick?
The five biggest drinkers, I think for me. Always been known to like a drink, and I'll always be the first in the bar and the last to leave. So whoever likes to have a drink for me.
So
Certainly Billows would be on that list.
yeah, I think he'd hold his own
He's on
there.
both lists.
So what does the future hold for you now?
Um, I think like certainly in my early years of racing, it was all about stock cars. Got to be at every meeting, in the garage 4 or 5 nights a week. Me now, it's there's a lot of younger drivers out there that are going to be racing for the titles, and I think my days are done on that. It's just about having a bit of fun, picking up the odd win here and there, and enjoying it, and bringing the family along and my friends along as well. So they love watching us, and I think that's where the future holds for me.
So I mean, you mentioned that your son has had a stint of racing recently. Do you think you could see him going into V8s?
Potentially, and obviously the wife's not going to like that, because but when he gets to that age, he can make that decision. I think we made the decision that minis wasn't right for us as a family. It's right for some, but we just didn't feel it was right for us. Love the micro F2s and what they do, and Claire and Jason's really helped us. Holden getting us there, and obviously Matt Smith again lent us a car for Ryan to race in, and he absolutely loved it, and it was brilliant. And lots of people again came together and helped. Hodgson, there was a few, Maynard, lots of people just helped us, and again, it just shows what the stock car, family is all about for me.
Yeah.
Is it doesn't matter what formula or what you're racing, they all come together, and it was really good, and he really enjoyed it. But he's now concentrating on his football. That's where he wants to concentrate his efforts on. But yeah, I think I'd like to see him one day in a V8, definitely.
So who would you say are your top 3 V8 drivers of all time then?
Obviously, I'm going to probably look at this from my time rather than maybe some of the past. I think people from the past. You know, your Lomaxes, your Nigel Parker, Witts, Andy Smith, Stuart Smith. I think they're before my time. So I'm probably going to look at my time in the racing of V8s, and Mick Rogers would be probably up there in that list. Obviously, certainly Kev Stutchbury. Probably couldn't limit it to three. I don't think the list would be right without Chris BriSCA and a Chris Fort. And I've still left quite a lot of good drivers out there, and I'm probably picking that on basically on the championship wins. But again, I've mentioned Brian Andrews. I think he's such a for the longevity that he's been in there to still be such a good driver. Darren Cottrell. I think Michael Boswell. It's a shame that he's sold his cars, but with the equipment that you have, was such a good driver. And we've got some good drivers and past and present in the formula. And but if I was to pick three or four, I think they would be my three or four: Kev Stutchbury, Mick Rogers, Chris Ford, Chris BriSCA, in no particular order.
Is there anyone you'd wish to mention or would like to thank?
Yeah, I suppose obviously first and foremost my family, for all their support and help. Carl and Dick, I couldn't do it without them too. Yeah, sponsors. I've got a few sponsors that help me along the way, which is great. So not going to mention them all, but yeah, they know who they are. Chris Cowley, Jim Bob, Matt Smith, Sign FX is he just nails it every time for me. James Bowles has done some good photography, so I really appreciate all that. And just the family, Mucker, Uncle Joe, and people like that. Because without them, you can't race a car at the weekends. You need that support. So, and if I've missed anybody, I do apologise. But yeah, just family, friends, and sponsors really. So thank you.
So thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me this evening, and all the very best for the future, and look forward to seeing you out there in 2021.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.